it's really my pleasure to be here, to be a part of this discussion, and to moderate this group. I'm excited about this because it is a very important topic that we need to continue this conversation, not only now, but going into the future. So I appreciate also the information that Robin gave. It sets really the tone, I think, for in the awesome responsibility that we have to address, not only here tonight, but also going into the future. So, and also in thanking Columbus Area Integrated Health Services Incorporated for having these discussions and continuing those also into the future, because without the discussion, I think sometimes things get forgotten. And when we really put it in someone's face, we really have to deal with it. And so that's what we are hopeful to do today, and come out of here also with some ideas and also some marching orders to really make things happen. Because I know, we often have a lot of conversation, but then let's put our boots on the ground and make some things happen. So I'm happy to see so many people here that are engaged. I'm happy to see the young people that are here to hear this, but also to have their input. So without further ado, I would like to start the program, this piece, with Sergeant Shante Boxall, and then we'll after that, get to introducing the rest of the panelists. Sergeant Shante Boxall, I'm not sure how many years you've been with the police department, but it's been, I know, many, over 20 plus years, and has got an incredible background. How many, 25?
25.
25 years with the Columbus Police, and she's currently a sergeant, and also with Homeland Security and Criminal Intelligence. So she's going to be speaking on gang violence and prevention, because that is one of definitely the major factors that impact our young people here in Columbus. So, Sergeant Boxall.
Okay. Really, I don't like to actually call it gang violence anymore. I think that when we we narrow it down to gang violence, we forget to look at all the youth violence out there, and there's a lot of youth violence. That's what we are encountering more and more every day. It's not so much, the Bloods and the Crips going at each other. We have small neighborhood groups, but the violence is there, and the violence is growing. And I'm sure that you all are aware that a 17-year-old girl lost her life the other day as a result of violence. She was shot and killed by a 15-year-old boy, allegedly. However, his life is over, if that is the case. And it's just a propensity for violence that we are seeing that alarms me, especially having been around for 25 years and working in the capacity that I'm working now. We've seen violence. You see it, you go, but now it is at such a level that it's very disconcerting to me, because I have a youth. I have a youth that could be out there and become a victim of this violence. And what we try to do, of course, as police officers, you all as taxpayers pay us to police. You do not pay us to social work with kids, but we often get put into that mode when we're out there just talking to the youth and trying to figure out what's going on. It is, I don't want to say an epidemic. I don't want to say that. I think that it's really easy to say it's an epidemic, it's a sickness, it's this, it's that, it's the other. But it's something that we certainly have to address, particularly in the black community. Our young people look at each other. I've talked to groups of them, just like I'm talking to groups of you, and you will see them looking at each other with such hate in their eyes. And the way I stop everything is to go, why are you looking so mean? I saw you look at her and what's all that about? Why are you looking mean at each other? Why do you just not like someone because of the sight of them? And then it can't explain it, of course, it can't be explained. But we are in a fight now. We are definitely in a fight. I would ask for you all to pray for the young 2-year-old that was shot last night also. As a result of violence, youthful violence, and it is, as I said, growing, and it's something that we have to deal with. How do we prevent this? That's what you all are here for. I mean, I think that I have suggestions, but I'm old school and haven't been on for a long time and experienced some things, and I've gone through some things recently as a part of my duties. And there are some times when I feel like there's no way, we just have to put them all in jail. But we can't do that. Our kids are definitely worth us working harder. So prevention is knowledge. Knowledge of what your kids are doing, knowledge of what's going on, watching them, being parents again. We find so many kids who aren't being raised by parents. So I don't want to take up too much time, but that's what I do. And if anyone ever needs anything, Napoleon knows I do trainings all the time where I take a lot more time to try to help educate parents and teachers and community members what actually a gang is, what they're involved in, and how to prevent it, and what you can do to at least try to communicate with the kids. You might not save them for the rest of their lives, but you could save them for one day. And if they have one day, then they still have a chance.
Great. Thank you so much, Sergeant. And I believe it's my understanding, does the sergeant have to go off and do an interview by chance?
Not yet.
Or are you going to be with
No, not yet.
Not yet, okay. Well, she might have to step out here at some time, so feel free to do that when necessary, Sergeant. So why don't we go ahead and then start off with the panelists here, and if you could spend a few minutes talking about yourself and your area of expertise and the agency you're from, and if we could start off on the far left there next to the sergeant there, and tell us who you are and your area of expertise with your agency.
I'm Phil Atkins from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services.
On behalf of our director, I'd very much like to thank you for inviting us to be part of this. It's not only important to our department, but this is important to me personally. This is a personal topic to me. It is my research interest, but it's also my heart. And I think that when people gather together and become of like mind, things happen. Recently, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services really took a look at the way we address cultural competence in our funding and in our consciousness and how we can promote within the services that we fund through agencies, through community groups, how we can really do something differently. Robin's statistics are compelling. I used to have to sit in those child fatality reviews, and it was the worst time of the year when those reviews came up. It was the most agonizing thing that as a mental health person that I had to do. And those statistics are compelling. They're embarrassing to me as a professional that that so much is preventable. But I wanted to read, I won't read a lot, but I wanted to read our commitment statement because it was very carefully crafted and every word was robustly discussed in our committee. But the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services is committing to meeting the behavioral health and wellness needs of all Ohioans. The department has dedicated itself to providing services, programs, policies that are appropriate and accessible to system consumers who encompass a broad range of human differences, such as ability and disability, age, educational level, ethnicity, gender, geographic origin, race, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, and values. The department recognizes that this vision must entail supporting and endorsing and encouraging community system partners, including county and local entities to identify, initiate, and implement cultural and linguistic competence services for all recipients of care. There is a transformation occurring in our department, and certainly it is exciting to be part of it. I have been a behavioral health provider for a very long time and seen lots of trends. And One of the things that has always kind of bothered me is I've always kind of wondered exactly how effective I really am. And how effective am I really with clients? And how effective am I really with families? And I would see people in communities help turn kids around and help engage kids in ways that I never could because I was behind a little pad writing down things and making diagnoses and looking at problems. And it just never really quite understood it. I want to tell you about the two best mental health therapists that I've encountered recently. These two women work in a summer program for kids in where I live near the driving park area. And guess what? They ride my bus in the morning. And they aren't clinicians, they aren't licensed, they aren't psychologists, they're grandmothers. And they volunteered at the summer program, and they prayed over those kids every single day. And by Friday, they were exhausted. And they would say, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know if I'm going to do it again. But as I listened to them, I thought, that is the single most important mental health prevention person in those children's lives. What is exciting to me is we've always operated on a very medical model. We've looked at people when they were sick. And we have funded our services for people who are sick, like doctors. What we have overlooked are those assets and those wonderful mental health folks in our communities. We have overlooked them because of the way we pay for services. We've overlooked them because we haven't taken them seriously. We've overlooked them because we've never asked. My particular area of research is on minority stress theory and how it relates to mental health and how people who of various minority identities come to mental health services. And they come in and they say, I'm depressed, or I have a substance abuse problem, or I'm anxious, or I need anger management. And we are very good at treating symptoms. We say, oh, your symptoms are this, your symptoms are this, you have this diagnosis, you're now this thing. You're not just angry, you're oppositional, you're a thing, and we bill it. But what we never do is we never ask, and we never understand the things that person brings to the session with them. We're looking at trauma now in a different way, assuming that people who walk through our doors have trauma. It used to be something that we would maybe ask a little bit about, but now we know that people have trauma in their lives, and it may not be something that might be traumatic to me or to you, but it was traumatic to them. And so we have to understand that. But where I would like to see us take it a step further is that when people come in, people of color, people of different sexual orientations, people from poverty come in, they have had that cumulative trauma of systems that have been working with them, working against them, devaluing them, and we never even ask. One of the most surprising things in my research findings was I worked with clinicians and I interviewed them and I said, so tell me about how you deal with people in different, these people that come to us from different backgrounds and different races and ethnicities and orientations, and tell me how you do it. Well, they were the finding was pretty consistent that they were generally nice folks. Social workers and counselors, they were generally nice folks, and they were generally accepting, and they wanted to do the right thing. Well, I really believe that being generally nice and being generally accepting and being embracing of people in general is not enough, because we don't know what we don't know when that client comes to us.
And let me stop you right there because we're short on time.
Okay.
You've already answered 4 of my questions.
All right. I think you can tell this is a pretty big passion of mine.
So I want to get to answer half
I'll
of the
take
questions.
I'll take half of Nettie's time and give the other half to Fran.
All right. No, I do appreciate the information, but yes, now I'm crossing off all my questions. No, just kidding. All right, so I know we spoke with the sergeant here, and so let's go on to our next guest here, and please tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency that you represent.
My name is Fran Frazier. I am a senior associate with Everyday Democracy. Everyday Democracy is an organization that helps communities use civic engagement or public dialogue as a way to get at some of the issues that communities are concerned about. Early in January, the president made a decision that we needed to look at mental health issues a little bit deeper. And so he launched a public dialogue about mental health. And under the leadership of Rochelle Martin, who was sitting right there in the second row, about 35 partners in this city came together to address that particular issue. And we conducted conversations on the west, north, east, south sides of Columbus, in addition to Reynoldsburg, Worthington. That's it. Okay, 7. And we got some amazing information from those conversations. So the people in these groups were people who lived in those neighborhoods. They were young people in high school and college, and I think even some middle school students, as well as people who have been diagnosed being mentally ill. And just ask the questions. What is it like for you? What are some of the issues you're concerned about? What do we need to be thinking about differently? And I'm hoping that in the back there are copies of the action ideas that came from these particular conversations. Because one of the ways that Everyday Democracy does its work is that it has dialogue, it pushes for action, but it really is wanting community people to go for change, not just to talk, not just to say, here's some good ideas, but what do we want to do about these good ideas, and how do we create the kind of systemic change that we need to create? So you have those there. But what I want to do is respond to the question that I was told to respond to, because it just really fits in with what a lot of our youth have said all over this city and county. So the question I was given was, how can mental health agencies partner with school systems? I do a lot of work in school systems around the country. And what I want to say about Franklin County is that there are mental health agencies partnering with school systems all the time. But I think what I want to do is to put into context why our children need mental health services. So here's some data that I think is going to coincide very nicely with what Robin offered us. So right now in our city, we have almost 60 homicides since January. 85% are male, 15% are female. 71.7% of those homicides are African American. 88% of those homicides are from guns. Over 49% of those homicides are with people between the ages of 20 and 39. Almost 25% of the homicides are infants to 19-year-olds. So we have heard already that a 2-year-old baby got shot last night. We know that Shavonna Whitehead would have been 18 today, and that Tavon Denson, who may have shot Shavonna, is only 15. And as Sergeant Boxell said, life may be over at 15. And I also want you to remember, this is another statistic. This all came from the Columbus Dispatch. Since 2000, the percentage of poverty in this state has increased by 65%. 65%. Now, I want you to think about this in terms of our children. So now this is in addition to the substance abuse, the divorce, the unemployment of children's caregivers, domestic violence, rape, assault, and experiences of fear and retaliation. This is trauma. This is chronic stress. And that's what our children bring to school every day. Every day, this is what they bring to school. So mental health agencies are needed to partner around issues of trauma and chronic stress. The behavior we see, the academic deficiencies we see, are based on what many of our children, not all of our children, but certainly a substantial number of our children are experiencing every day. It's hard to study for a test when people are partying to 3 o'clock in the morning. It's hard to read a book if you can't get to the library and do your book report. We need more social workers who can actually do social work in our schools. Not the paperwork, but the social work. We want our teachers to do that, and our teachers can't do that. We really need to find a way to let our teachers teach. Because they spend most of their time trying to keep order, dispensing discipline, trying to figure out what's going on. So the kids who do want to learn may maybe get 10 minutes because the classes are only 45, maybe 30 by the time they get going. We need after-school programs that intentionally build resiliency skills. And we have to have programs for our parents to learn how to push through. Now, I'm thinking this is what a real partnership ought to look like. And what we have learned in our community conversations across the city and the county is the importance of erasing the stigma of talking about mental illness. Because if you are living a life like many of our children are living, it will make you mentally unhealthy. We have to be able to talk to our children about depression. What do we say? I'm just tired. I'm just so tired. But we won't call it depression. Our kids are sad. They have thoughts about suicide. Our children, African American children, are committing more suicide than ever before. Our girls have become cutters. I have never seen the numbers of cutters of our girls as I have seen in the past 2 years. A lot of our kids, our children, are angry all of the time. Aggressive behavior and a lot of physical and emotional distress. Mental health agencies can give our parents the language to use because our parents don't have the language. They don't have the language for themselves, let alone be able to tell their children. I believe that our schools have to broaden their boundaries about what schools need right now. And we're going to have to figure out how to let agencies in. We're going to have to partner in a different way with teacher training institutions because we are getting teachers who are not ready for our children. Sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Frazier, because she's also commissioner within the.
Sorry.
Wonderful.
Well, it's okay because we talked about the passion, and I think you're hearing that passion here today, and so that's very evident, and working with these young people. And she did talk about those community conversations that we had with one of those with the young groups, and I was privileged to be a part of one of those conversations. I tell you what, until you sit down and speak with some of the young people and see what they are going through. And I remember the one conversation where he said that, you go to school and you're wanting to do the right thing, but, today you look at a guy who's, whether bigger you or who's the bully or what have you, and you don't know whether this is a good day for him or not. And so that will impact your day. And so you're in fear throughout the day.
That's right.
So it's incredible just to really hear them speak. And so if you get that opportunity, you've got to do that and sit down with a group of young people and see what their day is truly like. So thank you for that information. So next we have the Honorable Terry B. Jameson. If you would please speak on your area of expertise and a little bit about what you do.
Thank you. I'm currently serving on the Domestic Relations and Juvenile Court, and prior to doing that, I did represent juveniles in court and parents in abuse, neglect, dependency cases. I have represented, and now I find myself in the position on the bench where the most violent cases are handled by the judges directly. And we also handle the permanent custody cases where parental rights are being terminated. And in order for those children cases to be on my docket, those children have to be in the care of Franklin County Children's Services for 12 out of 22 months and not able to be returned to their parents. In order for the juvenile delinquency case to be on my docket, they have to commit what's called a Class 1 or a Class 2 felony, which could be a murder, a rape, a robbery. It has to be the more serious offenses, felonies in the first degree normally, or felony in the second degree if a gun is used in the commission of the offense. But I've been asked to talk about the progress as it relates to race and the treatment for children of color. This year, the federal government released its findings, and mentally ill boys in Ohio correctional facilities had been punished by being locked in seclusion, and Ohio was one of the most egregious states for this. And that's because in the facilities we did not have the correct treatment capabilities for mentally ill boys that are coming into the system. There's been recent changes where if a child is found to be legally incompetent, they can now be committed to an institution for attainment services. Attainment services are services that will help them to become legally competent to be adjudicated either delinquent or to have their cases transferred to the General Division of the Common Pleas Court to be prosecuted as an adult. Previously, if children could not be found competent, they were found to be dependent, and they would be placed in services for their mental health treatment. And now our focus has turned to attaining competency so that they can be prosecuted. And that, I think, is because of the number of juveniles that are now involved in the commission of the more violent crimes. And I'm like Sergeant Boxell. My husband and I together have 3 adult sons. We have 3 grandchildren that are sons, and we have 2 granddaughters. So we know that our grandsons are likely to become the victims of a violent crime just by virtue of who you are. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and Ms. Frazier talked about trauma. I see children daily that have been removed from their parents at a young age, placed back into the custody of their parents, removed from their parents again, and likely to be placed back into those situations again. And nobody has really dealt with their trauma. They come into the care of children's services, and I know she's going to talk about this, but there is a huge number of those same children that are the children that are involved in our delinquency proceedings. The same children that have been removed from their parents because of abuse, neglect, and dependency are also now coming back into our system in delinquency proceedings. The problem is the funding for mental health services, we know, has been cut tremendously. We know that there are not enough counselors trained to recognize trauma in children when they're dealing with them in delinquency proceedings. We now have a huge human trafficking problem, and those children are suffering trauma that is leading to different types of mental illnesses. They're developing different personality disorders and split personalities to deal with the traumas that they're dealing with and facing every day. Now, we have a new program that's coming into the court that's dealing with human trafficking called the Safe Harbor cases. But even in those cases, they are treated as delinquent children, but they are now being diverted into these programs. So our answer a lot of times has been they've come in as delinquency when they really have mental health issues. Yes. And part of my job as a judge is to try to recognize what programs I can order for these children. The problem also is we have the children being brought in, but a lot of times we can't make court orders for the parents. We are not engaging the parents in the mental health treatment because you have parents that have been victims of trauma themselves trying to raise children when they've never dealt with their own traumas. So we're dealing with the unlawful seclusion. We are also tackling, I'm on a subcommittee that is tackling the handcuffing of children in the court systems, how that is going to affect security for the people that are transporting them. But we know that any child that goes to a detention center is more likely to reoffend and go back to a detention center. And we're trying to deal with all the different traumas that we have to deal with and a lack of money to do so. We have kinship care providers that are providing care now, and I'm sorry, I'm cutting across all of these because that's what we deal with. We deal with it after it has been through children's services, after they've been through the detention center, after they've been through some of the mental health treatment, and if they're unsuccessful, they're going to end up back on our docket. Our children are more violent. Our children are more angry. They're more likely to be suspended from school. Boys are 85%, African American boys are 85% of who's in our juvenile detention facility. 85%. And I would just like to say that a lot of those children that are in the juvenile detention center are not necessarily there because of the crime they've committed, but because we can't find your parent to come and pick you up sometime. We need to understand that parenting doesn't look like Ozzie and Harriet. Parenting doesn't look like the Huxtables. We have parents that never show up even after they're contacted to pick their children up. And these children are suffering trauma because now I'm locked up in a facility and I'm subjected to people that are worse offenders than I am. So now I'm going to leave the detention facility with a trauma. Yes. I'm going to leave the detention facility with trauma. I may be bullied in the facility. I may be bullied in school. I may be truant from school because I'm being bullied at school. And nobody is really dealing with my trauma. Trauma has many different faces, and it looks many different ways. Rage is just one of the effects of trauma. So, yes, boys are more likely to be in the juvenile court system, but I would like to let you know that truancy is looking more like our gay, lesbian community. Truancy is looking more like our mentally challenged and physically handicapped children. They're more likely to be expelled and suspended from school than the children that fit the mainstream. And because of that, they're going through trauma. I don't fit in. And you know, we don't look at that as a trauma, but when you don't fit into the system and the system has no avenues to assist you, you feel like you're a victim of a trauma. So I don't know what the answer is to some of these things, but we do have some programs that we use within the court, the MST program and some of the other programming, where we're trying to engage the parents and try to find out what type of trauma the parents themselves have faced so that we know why you parent the way you parent. I can think of one case that I have in particular. The mother of this child is mentally delayed, and she was a victim of sexual abuse. And for a long time, it was thought her father was the father of her child. We later discovered that he was not. But because of the trauma that she has faced, and she's considered not only a victim but a perpetrator, we don't have services to deal with her victim status because of her being considered a perpetrator of sexual assault on her own child. She cannot go to some of the services that are available for victims because she's considered a perpetrator. But you're going to find that people that have had certain types of crimes perpetrated on them are more likely to perpetrate on others. So we've got to find a way to connect victim services and perpetrator services to deal with those mentally ill individuals, because she also has a mental illness diagnosis. Sure. So these things are just crossing the boundaries. And I'm sorry. Our juvenile perpetrators that are committing these crimes with weapons have often seen weapons pulled in their own homes. They've also had weapons pulled on them. And as a retaliation, it's not always retaliation, but sometimes it's a sense of survival. But most of them have some type of mental health diagnosis that they had as a child, and they were more than likely diagnosed when they were removed from their parents' care and placed in foster care, and for the first time had the ability to have mental health services. So I'm going to quit there. Okay.
And I want to give the opportunity for You also want to give the audience an opportunity to come up here to the mic. So when we get to that part, please come up to the mic and ask your question. So without further ado, to our next panelist and the president and CEO of Columbus Area Integrated Health Systems, Mr. Anthony Payne.
Thank you, Napoleon. I want to also thank all of our panelists for being here. Thank the audience for being here. In particular, thank the Columbus area staff for being here. And as the president and CEO, one of the things I get to do is make an executive decision. And so after we get done with Megan, we'll bring the audience right up. We committed to you all in our last town hall meeting that we have ample time for question and answer for the audience. So we'll hold true to that commitment. As you can tell, there's a lot of passion here. What we are attempting to do tonight and with this series of town halls meetings is just not talk about the issues, but also formulate a strategy on how to address those issues. One of the questions for me for the panel, through the last town hall meeting, questions came up related to our organization's ability to respond to non-traditional requests for services. And what do we have in place to offer assistance to families, particularly in areas of youth, that need services, and do we have non-traditional hours? I have staff here from our youth departments, and we are committed as an agency to have a flexible schedule. So if there are families in need, we have after-hour, evening, and weekend hours. Problems don't just rest in an 8 to 5 schedule. And so we are committed as an organization to look at all lines of our business to make sure that we have those flexible schedules built in that we can respond to community needs. The other question that was asked to me to respond to as relates to our work within the schools, and there's, as Fran and others have said, there's a lot of work going on in the schools. What we believe we are doing in the schools, and we want to continue in this vein, is that part of what we're trying to teach in terms of our partnership with the schools is trying to teach self-discipline and self-control. A lot of the issues that we are talking about that surface has to do with, lack of self-discipline, lack of self-control, and lack of value of yourself. If I don't value me, I'm not going to value you. So we're trying to teach those skills within the school system to make sure that our young people have those skills, and we're partnered with the schools to further that response. The other area that we were asked to respond to, and I'm trying to run through this quickly, all in 2 minutes, so that we can get to you, was just our commitment to diversity within our psychiatry staff as it relates to working with our young people. We have a full-fledged plan in place right now on how we can do that, how we can make sure that we are culturally sensitive in terms of making sure that we have people that our students and our youth can walk in, they can identify with, they can be open with communicating their needs, and then they can respond to them, in a more, common way. So those are areas that on the prevention side that we're highly committed to. I want to go further, but I know our time is short, so we're going to go to Megan, and then we'll let our moderator lead the audience into discussions with our organization and with the rest of the panel here.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Megan Stevens, and I work for Franklin County Children's Services. In thinking about what everybody has said here tonight, obviously it's very powerful. I feel like it's going to be difficult for me to be on the level that everyone else is. But specifically with my expertise at the agency, I work in our I'm the Director of Community Development. I work with 3 specific programs. I work with our Kinship Department, our Family to Family program, which works with area settlement houses, and I work with our Volunteers program. And I wanted to bring those up specifically because in listening to the panelists talk tonight, really what resonated with me was the importance of relationships, the importance of people in children's lives, and showing that they care and showing that they're going to be there, because that really demonstrates, statistically speaking, research-based, that makes a difference for kids. And so the 3 programs that I've mentioned for Franklin County Children's Services, I think has a positive impact in those areas, in creating relationships with kids, which creates then hope in kids' lives, which then creates the ability to make stronger decisions so that they can make decisions that make them safer and have more positive impacts in their well-being, and hopefully lessens the trauma in their lives. Our kinship program, the agency, I've heard other agencies have really made a shift within the past few years, and Franklin County Children's Services has really made a shift in regards to its commitment to families and its commitment to protecting children by strengthening families. That's our tagline. And one of the ways that we have demonstrated that concretely is that although we recognize foster care as an important piece of our systems, that we no longer house an internal foster care network. And instead what we did was we transferred all of those staff to support kinship families. So we actively look for kids, for kinship families, when families come to the attention of our agency and children need to be removed from their families for issues of safety. We advocate strongly that we find people that have relationships with those children in our community. Kinship to us does not mean blood. Kinship to us means people who have relationships with the family, or people who have long-standing relationships with the kids. I don't know about you. Probably you have lots of aunts and uncles in your family that really aren't aunts and uncles, but I would much rather be with them than with somebody that I don't know. And so talking and looking about what it is that we as a system do to perhaps add to the trauma in our children's lives, like placing a child in foster care. This was a huge step for Franklin County Children's Services to say, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to make this transition for children to be safe, to be in a place where they have that support, where the family, where the caregiver knows the birth family, and they're able to support that family. And also that we want to have those children return home if that child would need to come out of their home, and they have those natural support networks already in place so that those relatives, those friends of families, those neighbors are able to continue to provide support for those families on an ongoing basis. Because as we know, every one of us struggle and every one of us have needs. And if it weren't for my mom that I still call at whatever age I am, I'm not going to tell you, but I still call my parents and ask for help and ask for guidance, and we all need that. It's almost near impossible to do something in isolation, and so we recognize that. Our volunteer programs, we have 6 different volunteer programs that provide, 5 of them provide one-on-one mentoring support for kids. Again, demonstrating the need for relationship building. Mentors demonstrate that they are able to significantly impact kids in regards to making safer choices, staying in school, not choosing to commit crimes, not being involved in situations where they're going to be making poor choices. And so that, to me, is one of the most important programs that we have at the agency. I talked a little bit about our family-to-family program. Our agency is committed to finding resources within the community that are natural resources. They're not artificial ones that we bring in, but we work with the settlement houses that are already in the community where families are so that we can help support families create relationships with entities that are already there, that are going to be there long after we're gone, so that they can develop those relationships, they can seek out support and help within their neighborhoods, and in fact, turn to seek out help from other people that they meet within those settlement houses. It's not just about the professionals or the people working with the families. It's about who they're connecting with within their own neighborhoods to provide those supports, because they're going to be there much longer than anybody else is. And those are 3 different ways that Franklin County Children's Services is very strongly committed to really strengthening families through and protecting our kids. So that's a hopefully quick snapshot.
And again, if we had, so many more people like yourselves, so passionate about what you're doing out there and making that positive impact, we would be much a better world for that. And so we appreciate the work that you're doing and continue to work with that passion. And once again, if you could give our panel a round of applause. And so we were committed to making sure that our audience members had that opportunity to ask those questions of our panelists here so they can gain more insight into the knowledge and also what we talked about in regards to, where do we go from here? What do we do, from here? So if you could, we need you to come up to the podium to ask those questions. And if you wish to form a line over here, that would be greatly appreciated. So you can start making your way up to the podium at this time, if you could. And I think the President CEO is back there, so if you feel free, are you coming up here, Mr. Craig? Yes, you are. Okay, so we had, I just wanted to make sure I don't start talking. We do have our first person up here to come up to the microphone to have a question, but also someone who has been in the community and working in the community and working with young people.
Hey, how you doing? The other day I woke up and I was like, I am so tired of being an angry black man. And I was like, okay, today I'm not going to be the angry black man. And then I heard that there was an African American male who was participating in a program that was being funded by the government, who said, take that kid out of the program and kick him out because he may mess up the image of our agency. And I thought to myself, I don't like that. And so I want to ask you a question, because in my world that I come from, in corporate America, if you made hamburgers and nobody bought those hamburgers, you would shut down. And so for 30 years, I've been coming to meetings like this. We've been having these conversations. We've been talking about what we need to do. And agencies have been in communities, and the communities have gotten worse. And so at what point do we decide that the life of our children, mental health, homicides, is more important than continually funding the agencies that are in our community who produce absolutely no results and who produce absolutely no progress. And so we fund these things, these programs, or these systems, because you know this is a systemic issue, and it really takes a big program. We got to flip this thing and figure it out. So when did we start holding agencies, government, politicians, everybody accountable? Because 30 years, we've been talking about homicides. 30 years, we've been talking about black boys killing black boys. 30 years, we've been talking about education. For 30 years, we've been talking about this stuff. I am sick of talking about it, and I'm tired of being an angry black man.
Well, and I don't know how to follow that. But you know, the thing is, there are some. I think when we look at history, and you know, we were recently doing a history on our office and things that have changed and not changed over the years. And there are things that are more difficult to change because, like turning a big ship. And you know, my father said, you know, we can, and he was big into the civil rights, and he says we can send a man to the moon, but we still have a problem with education. And it comes down to commitment. It comes down to are we committed to the problems at hand? And so I think, you know, we do what each of us can do, and we can be committed in ourselves to make a difference. Every single one person here, from the youngest to the oldest, can make a difference, can make a positive impact. You know, so as long as we keep that in mind and keep striving toward the goal of making that difference. We do have some challenges, you know, politically and so on and so forth. But we've got to make sure that we ourselves are doing what we can do to make a difference in our community. And also don't forget about others' communities, because we are all in this together. So I hear what you're saying, but I also understand that we have to do what we can do and make our best effort to that. So I see your
I would
your
just
hand
like
raised.
to respond to that. The U.S. Justice Department actually filed a lawsuit against the state of Ohio dealing with the incarceration and seclusion of mentally ill boys. So the legal system does offer us opportunities. We may not like the fact that Ohio has been sued, but the fact that in their study, they cited to 10 mentally ill juveniles who spent from 11% to 38% of their time in seclusion over 6 months. It's taking this lawsuit to bring this to bear. I'm on the court, you know, it doesn't bother me in the least that Ohio is being sued. If we are locking up children and secluding them, seclusion leads to mental illness. So if we're doing it and we have to get the lawsuit, I'm sorry that it's Ohio, but if the Department of Justice had to file it, they just had to do what had to be done to protect the rights of children.
Thank you much. So we want to get as many questions up here as possible.
Thank you. Good evening. I don't have a question per se to our panelists, but let me first thank you guys for that, the information you shared, because when you hear this information and the data that you provide, it makes you want to cry, just to hear it. But this kind of tags on, you were kind of taking my comments when Mr. Bell said, what are we committed to do individually? What is each one of us doing in any child's life other than our own? I mean, don't count your children and your grandchildren. What children's lives are you involved in individually? I have a Girl Scout troop, and I've had adults come to me and say, why are you doing that? We have girls and boys on waiting lists because we don't have adults to volunteer. That's why they end up in some of these systems. They talked about the relationships that they got somebody to go to. We're not stepping up. We can have every program you want, but if individuals don't take an hour a week to go help a kid learn how to read, if we don't have an individual take 2 hours to do a boys club, go teach some boy how to play baseball, the problem lies on us individually. It doesn't allow in all these systems and all these programs. It's what do you do other than watching Facebook, watching TV, and all the sports stuff? Where do we spend time working with all these kids walking down the street? What boy have you said, pull your pants up, young man? You know, instead of us running and feel like we ain't doing, they are the problem. We the problem. We're the problem. Thank you.
Sandra movie.
Right, that's right. Thank you. Napoleon. I wanted to, Sandra, I thank you so much for that. Because I do think we need to be reminded. And one of the last things I want to say is we really do have to begin to own our children and stop being so afraid of them. Because I think that's what gets in the way. The Search Institute said that there are 8 key thriving indicators that lets us know whether our children are healthy. Do our children exhibit any kind of leadership? Do they help other people? Do they value difference in other people? Do they know how to overcome adversity? Have they been taught to be persistent? Do they maintain good health? Do they eat healthy? Can they resist danger? Do they have the resilient skills to do that? Do they know how to delay gratification? Can they save money? And are they willing to succeed in school? If you are a troop leader, like Sandra said, she's teaching all of these thriving indicators. How we train our children up are these kind of indicators. Do you know how to put pennies in a bank? We used to have things like this. But what the Search Institute is saying is this is how we keep healthy kids. And truthfully, it's not the school that does this, it's the community that does this. Mm-hmm. And we really do have to get back to owning our children.
We have to own it. And appreciate your comments there, Ms. Frazier. And if we don't have any additional questions, I would like to give this time, I'd like to give 1 minute to each panelist. 1 minute.
1 minute. Bless your heart.
Each of our panelists to say your ending words here, and also, even more importantly, contact numbers and websites, what have you, for our viewing audience and others to be able to connect with you. And we'll start on the left.
Wow, very powerful evening, and I'd like to just make my remarks to our two commentators and questions. There is nothing that happens good in the life of a child that isn't deposited there outside of a relationship. And those relationships are key. If I were funding mental health services and I could afford 10 social workers, I would take 2 social workers and 8 grandmothers every single day. And so the community, it is a community problem, it's us, but the systems also need to change as well. And so I think that dialogue like this is how we make that happen. Thank you.
If they want to contact you or your
You can contact me at the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Philip Atkins, and I have some information about the governor's Start Talking initiative, which this is very much a dialogue. We've started talking tonight, and I appreciate that, so you can get some of my contact information back on the table.
I have a lot to say, but I don't have any time to say it in, except that I agree with what everyone said here. A lot of times after we have a tough weekend, I had a tough weekend at the Asian Fest this year with youth violence. So a lot of times after we have a tough weekend and I make it back to the office, I'll sit there and and these kids and the parents aren't there, and these kids are suffering from mental illness and no one's looking at it. We have young kids. Do you not think that that 2-year-old maybe won't remember, but I guarantee you that the 10-year-old who was shot at Juneteenth, you think that kid doesn't have post-traumatic stress syndrome? That's right. That kid is sick. He has to survive from that. And those things stay with them forever. So when I listen to the panel, everything that they say, I say, but as an officer, it's a little different. I am going to be the one, that has to encounter kids, unfortunately, at the bad time in their lives. But I want to end with saying I was at Jazz and Rip Fest this weekend. I know you're like, what? At Jazz and Rip Fest, in the middle where Earl Klugh was playing, there were families there. There were mothers and fathers and kids and young black kids, particularly that I paid attention to. And they were playing football and throwing football and kicking ball. And some of them kind of bopping to the music a little bit. And after it was over, I told one of my officers, I said, it was very nice to see the families together and the kids playing and the mothers and fathers paying attention to their kids, playing with them. And I didn't have to hear some young teenage mother cussing their kid out. And we walked over to where you go out on Spring Street, and I'll be darned if there wasn't a young mother just cussing her young child out. So remember, our babies are listening to being called every name in the book that you can think of. Our babies are being called that. And they're growing up with that, and then they're coming to me, and they're coming to the judge, and they're coming to mental health facilities. And so I have to sometimes remind myself of that as a police officer, that when you ask yourself, why is it this way, and then you see the answer is right in front of your face sometimes. I also think that we should have a panel like this, but with our young people sitting here. Instead of us with cameras on it, have cameras on and ask them, because you're right. When you talk to them, it's totally different. You get a perspective, and it's refreshing at times.
Is there a number that they can connect with you?
My number, 645, no. 645, actually it's 44798. And that's my direct desk number. And you also, if you go to like the gang tip line on the city's intranet, all of those messages come to me. So it won't necessarily be taken as a gang tip if you want to talk to me, or see Boxel at columbuspolice.org.
I really said everything I wanted to say, but I will share this. Someone told me that in some village on the continent of Africa, the people say, when they say hello, instead of saying hello, they say, "How are the children?" And that answer will describe how you are. So maybe if we asked ourselves that question more often, instead of, "Hey, how you doing?" "Hey, how are the children?" Then we'll know what the answer is, and then perhaps we'll also be reminded about what we need to do.
How are the children? Thank you so much.
Are you going to give your contact information?
Oh, yes, your contact information.
I'm going to give you Napoleon's number. I'm a commissioner. 645-1993.
Exactly, and we'll make sure that she connects with me. All right.
I would just like to say that I'm grateful for the legal system and being used as an arm of change, especially when it comes to our mentally ill population. Whether you're a juvenile or an adult, funding has been cut for mentally ill programs. I can be contacted at 614-525-5223, or you can send me an email at Terry, TERRI_JAMISON @fccourts.org. It is troubling for me sometimes to watch what happens to mentally ill children when they're in the system. But if we're going to challenge anything, we also have to challenge the regulations that have taken a lot of judicial discretion away. Judicial discretion has been taken away in a lot of areas. We have mandatory sentencings, mandatory guidelines, mandatory relinquishment of jurisdiction. So if we're going to challenge it, it has to be challenged because I am constrained by the law that is there. And although you're mentally ill, if you're not mentally incompetent, then you will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
We're going to step over President and go on to this.
I guess my last words tonight would be a challenge, a call to action. As I said earlier, we have many volunteer programs at our agency. The phone number to volunteer in our agency is 275-26. Oh my goodness, flew out of my head. 275-2690, I believe. But if you Google Franklin County Children's Services, you will be able to find us. There are volunteer programs for College Bound, supporting children who are interested in becoming in secondary education and finishing through trade schools or through colleges or getting their associate's degree. There are African American programs, specifically Simba and Malaika, which work with kids to give them knowledge about rites of passage and their cultural history and promoting positive self-esteem. There are programs that are a friendship program where it's one-on-one matches with giving kids just positive opportunities. You don't have to spend money. You can go to the parks. You can go to various locations. You can have the kids in your home and make brownies. You can take them grocery shopping and learn how to follow a grocery list and budget. There's lots and lots of opportunities. And you don't have to just look at Franklin County Children's Services. The Mentoring Center of Central Ohio, Big Brothers Big Sisters, there's lots and lots of organizations that will fit your passion and your desire. As I mentioned earlier, our kinship program, if you know of somebody that does need support within the child welfare system and or a child that is in care, and you have a relationship with them, contact them. Contact us and let us know so that we can provide those supports, those additional supports to the family. That's my call to action.
All right, well, excellent, excellent. Throughout this conversation, I heard several words. I heard hope, heard what do we do? Prevention is knowledge. We're in crisis. Lessen the trauma. Heard about volunteering and mentorship. And lastly, we heard call to action. This is a call to action to all of us here, individually and collectively. I heard collaboration. We need to get together and we need to address this in a serious, strategic fashion, but we need to get together to make it happen. So, with that being said, I would like to leave you with the parting words of the President and CEO, Mr. Anthony Jennings.
First, let's give Napoleon Bell a hand. He always does a fine job. I want to also thank all of our panelists for being here, and as you can tell from the comments, there's a lot of passion in the room. I've been on my assignment at Columbus area now for a little over 4 months. I work for a very driven board of trustees that fits my personality. We are wanting to be about results. So these conversations are just not conversations that we'll have and then not take any action. I think that's reckless leadership. You bring people together, you talk about issues, and then you don't act on this. So one of the things that I've already started doing in my role is trying to recruit people to join this great staff that we have that passion, that want to work with young people, that want to work with our adults who struggle with mental health issues. I see about 5 of them in this room today. And so I know they have that passion. They come on their own time to look and see what we're trying to do as an organization, and I hope they select us to join. We have a serious challenge ahead of us as a community. We also have a lot of opportunities as a community. The spirit of collaboration, the spirit of collective will, and keeping in mind the theme that every child matters is how we will resolve these issues. We can't solve them today. They didn't happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of planning. We have to drop the turf. We have to drop the silos. We have to be willing to hold one another accountable, but we have to be willing to partner together. I encourage our funders that are here to look at things in that light. Let's look at results. Let's look at compassion and willingness to roll our sleeves up and really make a difference. I want to thank you all for being here. Look forward to seeing you hopefully at our clinical conference on September the 12th. We'll be planning one more town hall session in October. We'll be looking at the issues around affordable housing and its impact on these issues. So thank you for your attendance here tonight. Have a good evening.